Hi Team Grade 5, it's your self-proclaimed favorite mathematics teacher, Miss Aaliyah Brewster. It's time for us to do Grade 5 mathematics, but just in case you're not feeling motivated, remember the words of Paul Halmos. The only way to learn mathematics is to do mathematics. So what are you waiting for? Grab a pencil and a notebook, get settled, we're about to start. To begin today's lesson, we're going to do a brief recap on what are fractions. A fraction is a part of a whole thing or a part of a group of things. For example, 1/8 of a pizza or 1.5 oranges. Now let's move on to parts of a fraction. There are two main parts of a fraction, that is the numerator and the denominator. The numerator is the number at the top. It tells how many pieces you have from the whole. For example, if you look at the circle that's showing, the circle is divided into 4 pieces, but only one piece is shaded. The numerator tells us how many pieces are shaded or taken away. On the other hand, the denominator is the number at the bottom. It tells how many total pieces the shape is divided into. Using the same example of the circle, you would notice that the circle is divided into 4 pieces. That's because the denominator is 4. Why are fractions important? Fractions are important because they're commonly used in everyday life. For example, let's say a store is offering a discount on a specific item in which the sale price is 1/3 off. Or perhaps you want to bake a cake whereby the recipe requires you to use half a tablespoon of baking powder. If you don't know what half is, you can risk making the cake dense instead of fluffy and moist. So knowing how to use fractions is therefore an important mathematical and life skill. Today's topic is about mixed numbers. So it's very important for us to have a general understanding of what a mixed number is. 2 3/4 is an example of a mixed number. This is when whole numbers and a fraction are written together. In this case, the whole number is 2 and the fraction is 3/4. The same fraction can also be shown as an improper fraction, being represented by 11/4. This is worth the same amount as the mixed number, but it is not separated into whole numbers and a fraction. You see, improper fractions have a numerator which is bigger than the denominator. When you're subtracting mixed numbers, you must first know how to convert a mixed number to an improper fraction. To turn mixed numbers into improper fractions, we have to look at the denominator of the fraction first, because that number will be the denominator of the improper fraction. For example, if we're asked to turn 3.5 into an improper fraction, the fraction in the mixed number has 2 as its denominator. So the improper fraction will also have 2 as its denominator. 3 whole ones are 6 halves. I repeat, 3 whole ones are 6 halves. And if you still don't understand this, you can look at the image that is depicting how 3 whole ones are equivalent to 6 halves. Therefore, there is also another half that is left because remember, the mixed number is 3.5. So we also have to take into consideration the half. So taking into consideration that extra half, the total number of halves would be 7. Therefore, 3.5 turned into an improper fraction would be 7 halves. When we're asked to convert a mixed number to an improper fraction, we do 2 things. First, we multiply the whole number by the denominator. Then, we add the numerator. So using this example of 3.5, to easily convert that into an improper fraction, we're going to multiply the whole number, which is 3, by the denominator. So that would be 3 times 2 will give us 6, and then we add the numerator, that will give us 1. Therefore, the improper fraction would be 7 halves. Just in case you don't understand, let's work another example. Here we're asked to convert the mixed number 2 3/4 into an improper fraction. To do this, we're going to follow the same guidelines that I mentioned before. We're going to multiply that whole number by the denominator. So therefore, we're multiplying 2 by 4. That would give us 8. To 8, we're going to add the numerator, which is 3. So 8 plus 3 would be 11. And we always have to write the value of the denominator below that number because we're still dealing with fractions. Therefore, when we convert 2/4 to an improper fraction, we would get 11/4. So what did we learn so far? We learned that mixed numbers and improper fractions are worth the same amount as one another, but they are written differently. Mixed numbers are made up of a whole number and a separate fraction. On the other hand, improper fractions do not show whole numbers separately, and the numerator is bigger than the denominator. For example, take 2/2 as the mixed fraction. As an improper fraction, 2/2 would be written as 5/2. Both of them, they're worth the same amount, but they're just written differently. Moving on with today's topic, which is subtracting mixed numbers, we're going to work various examples to help you to understand different methods of subtracting mixed numbers. So method 1 involves subtracting the whole numbers first, then subtracting the fractions by converting them into like fractions, and then we're going to add the difference of the whole numbers and the fractions. So let's work a practical example. We have 6 1/3 subtract 3 1/12. To do this, we're going to first subtract the whole numbers. The whole numbers would be 6 and 3. So 6 subtract 3 will give us 3. Once we're finished subtracting the whole numbers, we put that aside and then we group the two fractions by themselves. In this case, the fractions are 1/3 and 1/12. Now looking at those two fractions, they're not the same, meaning they don't have the same denominator. So what we have to do is to convert these fractions into like fractions. And to do this, we're going to look at the different denominators. The denominators that we have here is 3 and 12. So now we're going to identify what is common between 3 and 12. Here we're going to find the lowest common multiple. So the lowest common multiple for 3 and 12 would be 12. Now that we know the lowest common multiple for 12 and 3 is 12, we're going to convert each fraction individually to make both of them alike. So first we're going to look at 1/3. To convert 1/3 into a like fraction, we're going to divide the denominator, which is 3, by 12. That would give us 4. So 4 is our main number for this fraction. So now we're going to multiply 4 by 3. That will give us 12. Then we're going to multiply 4 by 1. That will give us 4. Therefore, the fraction of 1/3 now becomes 4/12. Okay, moving on, now we're going to look at the second fraction, which is 1/12. To convert 1/12 into a like fraction, we're going to divide that denominator, which is 12, by the lowest common multiple, which is also 12. So 12 divided by 12 would give us 1, obviously. Now we're going to multiply 1 by the denominator, which is 12, and that will give us 12. Then we're going to multiply 1 by the numerator, which will also give us 1. So that fraction now becomes 1/12. Now that we have both fractions in like terms, it is safe for us to take away. So to do this, we simply write back the denominator, which would be 12, and we just subtract the two numerators, 4 and 1. So 4 subtract 1 will give us 3. Now that we're finished subtracting our whole numbers as well as our fractions, we can merge the two to arrive at our answer. However, there is one more step that we must do. Looking at the answer for the fraction or the difference for the fraction, which is 3/12, that fraction can be reduced further. So if we were to reduce 3/12 further, we would get a quarter. Okay, we would get a quarter. Therefore, the answer for this activity would be 3¼ 3¼ So when we subtract 3¼ from 3 1/12, the answer would be 3¼ If you're not comfortable with the first method, here is another method that will help you when you're subtracting mixed numbers. We'll call this method method 2. So to do method 2, we need to first convert the mixed numbers into improper fractions. Remember I said that knowing how to convert a mixed number to an improper fraction is important. This is why it's important. Good. So once you would have finished converting the mixed numbers to improper fraction, the next step would be to change the fractions into like forms. This means that we will find the common lowest multiple. Then we will now do the usual subtraction of the fraction, and then we're going to express our answer in its lowest term. So let's work our activity step by step. Using the same sum, which is 6 1/3, subtract from 3 1/12. So according to method 2, we have to first convert those mixed numbers into improper fractions. So let's look at 6 1/3 first. We're going to convert that into an improper fraction. To do this, we simply multiply the whole number by the denominator and add the numerator. So when we multiply 6 times 3 and we add 1, that would give us 19. But 19 is not a fraction. We have to put back the denominator. So the improper fraction then would be 19/3. Now that we're finished converting the first mixed number into an improper fraction, we're going to convert the second number into an improper fraction. To do this, we're going to multiply the whole number by the denominator and add the numerator. So this means we're going to multiply 3 times 12 and add 1. That would give us 37. But 37 by itself is not a fraction. We have to put back the value of the denominator, which is 12. So the fraction then would be 37/12. Now that we have both mixed numbers converted into improper fractions, we can now change these fractions into similar fractions. How do we do this? We identify the lowest common multiple. To identify the lowest common multiple, we're looking at the value of the denominators. In this case, we have 3 and 12. So the lowest common multiple of 3 and 12 would be 12. Now it's time for us to convert these fractions into like fractions, meaning we're going to convert them to make both denominators the same. Okay, we're converting them to make both the denominators the same. So let's look at the first one, which is 19/3. To convert 19/3 into a like fraction, we're going to divide 12 by 3. That would give us a value of 4. But we're not done yet. We multiply that value by the numerator and by the denominator. So multiplying 4 by 19 will give us 76. And multiplying 4 by 3 will give us 12. So 19/3 is now converted into 76/12. Putting that aside, we're now going to move on to convert the other improper fraction into a like fraction. Okay, so in this case, we're converting 37/12, and we're using the lowest common multiple of 12. When we divide 12 by 12, that would give us 1. Now we have to multiply 1 by the numerator and 1 by the denominator. So 1 times 37 is 37, and 1 times 12 would be 12. So that fraction remains as it is. Now it's safe for us to subtract because both of those fractions have the same denominator. Both of them have the same denominator, so it's safe for us to subtract. So subtracting, we're going to subtract 76 from 37. That would give us 39/12. Therefore, the fraction now becomes 39/12. Now, if you look at that value, 39/12, you would notice that the numerator is bigger than the denominator, and it can be reduced further. So reducing 39/12, that fraction will become 13/4. Still, you would notice that 13 is bigger than the denominator. Therefore, we can convert that number or that fraction into a mixed number. So to convert that into a mixed number, we simply divide 4 times 13, or how many times can 4 go into 13? That would be 3 times. And we'll have a remainder of 1. So 3 will be the whole number. Then we put 1 as the remainder, which will become the numerator, and we write back the value of the denominator. So looking at the fractions, you would notice that we arrive at the same answer. Whether we used method 1 or method 2, the answer remains the same, which is 3¼ Now it's time for you to try one on your own. Here I'm going to ask you to subtract 7 5/12 from 2 7/12. If you look at that problem, you would notice that the denominators for both mixed numbers are the same. Therefore, you are not required to find the lowest common multiple. You can skip that step. So take some time and try to work that problem using either method 1 or method 2. Were you able to get all correct? Let's verify. For this activity, you were tasked with identifying the difference between 7 5/12 and 2 and 7/12. Now, since the fractional part have a common denominator, meaning that both of them have 12 as their denominator, we have to subtract the larger fractional part, which is 7/12, from the smaller unit, which is 5/12. To do this, we must borrow 1. How do we borrow 1? Since the first mixed number, which is 7 and 5/12, and the fraction 5/12 is smaller than the other fraction, we are required to borrow 1 from 7. To do this, we must bear in mind that the value of 7 is 12, okay, because the denominator is 12. So when we borrow 1 from the whole number, 7, we add the value of it, which is actually 12. So 12 plus 5 would give us 17. Therefore, the fraction of 5/12 now becomes 17/12. But the whole number does not remain at 7 because we would have borrowed 1 from it. So in its entirety, the mixed number now becomes 6 and 17/12. Now that fraction is perfect for us to continue with the problem. Continuing, we're going to subtract the two whole numbers and the fractions separately. First, we're going to do the whole numbers. Now we're going to subtract the fractions. The fractions would be 17/12 and 7/12. And since the denominators are the same, we simply subtract the numerator. So 17 subtract 7 will give us 10. Therefore, our fraction would be 10/12. Although our answer would be 10/12, that fraction can be reduced into its simplest possible term. Once we would have done that, you would recognize that the answer would be 5/6. But we're not finished there. Now we have to add the difference from the whole number and the difference of the fraction. So remember, when we subtracted the whole numbers, we arrived at the answer 4. So we add 4 to that fraction and our answer would become 4 and 5/6. In the exam, you may not be explicitly given the two mixed numbers and asked to subtract them. Sometimes it may come in the form of problem solving. Let's work one example in which the scenario is given to us and we have to identify the mixed number, then subtract. In this case, the scenario is, at the end of a basketball match, the head coach realized that the bottle of water, which was initially 9 and 3/8 liter of water, had been reduced to 3 and 9/16 liters. How many liters of water was consumed by the players? I know it may seem confusing, but it's quite simple. First, we're going to identify the two mixed numbers that we're working with. So the initial volume of water is 9 and 3/8. How do we write 9 and 3/8? We write 9 as a whole number, and then the fractional part would be 3 above 8, which is 3/8. Then we have to identify the mixed number for the final volume of water. From this scenario, they said the final volume of water is 3 and 9/16. How do we write this? We write 3 as a whole number and then 9 above 16 as 9/16, which is the fractional part. Now that we have both mixed numbers, we can subtract. Therefore, we have to subtract 9 and 3/8 from 3 and 9/16. To do this, we're going to use method 2, whereby we're going to convert these mixed numbers into improper fractions. Let's look at the first one, 9 and 3/8. When converting a mixed number to an improper fraction, we simply multiply the whole number by the denominator and add the numerator. In this case, we're going to multiply 9 by 8 and add 3. That would give us 75. 75 as it is not a fraction, so we have to put the denominator from the mixed number. So the fraction there would be 75/8. Now that we would have converted the first mixed number, let's convert the other one, which is 3 and 9/16. To do this, we're following the same principle. We're going to multiply the whole number by the denominator and add the numerator. In this case, we're multiplying 3 times 16, and to that answer, we're going to add 9. The answer we'll arrive at is 57. But 57, again, by itself is not a fraction, so we have to put back the value of the denominator, which is 16. So the fraction then would be 57/16. Now that we have both of our mixed numbers converted into improper fractions, we can now move on to identify the lowest common multiple. Why do we have to do this? We have to do this because those two fractions, they don't have the same denominator. The denominator for the first fraction is 8, while the denominator for the second fraction is 16. Therefore, we have to make those fractions alike before we can subtract. To do this, we're going to find the lowest common multiple. The lowest common multiple of 8 and 16 would be 16. Now that we know the lowest common multiple for 8 and 16 is 16, we're going to convert each fraction into similar fractions to make them alike so that it's easier for us to subtract. To do this, let's look at the first fraction, which is 75/8. We're going to divide 16 by 8. That would give us 2. We're going to multiply 2 by the numerator and 2 by the denominator. In this case, 2 times 75 is 150, and 2 times 8 would be 16. So our new fraction is 150/16. Now that we would have completed converting the first fraction into a similar fraction that is easier for us to subtract, we're going to move on to the second fraction to convert that as well. Now the second fraction is 57/16. Same as we would have done before, we're going to divide the denominator of that fraction by the lowest common multiple. So in this case, we're dividing 16 by 16, and that would give us 1. Now that we know that answer is 1, we can multiply 1 by the numerator and 1 by the denominator. Obviously, when you multiply 1 by 57, you're going to get 57. When you multiply 1 by 16, you're going to get 16. So the fraction there remains the same. So what we have now is two fractions with similar denominator. That means it's easier now for us to subtract. So since we have similar denominators, all we need to do is subtract the numerators. In this case, we're subtracting 150 from 57. When we're finished subtracting the numerators, we would arrive at an answer of 93/16. However, this answer must be converted back into a mixed number. To do this, we simply divide 93 by 16. 93 can be divided into 16 5 times with 13 remainders. So 5 becomes the whole number, 13 is the numerator, and then we write back the denominator of 16. Therefore, the liters of water that were consumed by the players is 5 and 13/16. Okay, boys and girls, that would have brought us to the end of our lesson. Thank you once again for tuning in, and remember the words of Paul Halmos. The only way to learn mathematics is to do mathematics. This means that even though our study time would have come to an end, this does not mean that you have to stop practicing. If you wish to be successful at your upcoming exam, you must practice. Thank you once again for tuning in, and goodbye.